Alrighty, everybody, welcome into this time to Maine, and today, we're gonna read through Mark chapter 7 and 8. But first, I want to go over something here with you guys. Um, I didn't watch the Olympics last night. I knew what happened. Okay, why are we allowing that to happen? Why would they compare the Last Supper from the Bible to a bunch of men dressed like women? Why would we do that? Why would we blasphemize this? You realize that when that happens, that curses us. There's people that did that. Um, if stuff goes wrong in the Olympics in the next few days, tragedy happens, it's because they did it. They brought that upon themselves. That's God's way of saying, hey, you guys need to stop this. So, I do not condone to what was done at the Olympics last night. I will say that. There's so much of that. It's France. It's a different country. It's not America. Um, I have my other opinions about, even more opinions about what should happen with those kind of people. But I do think, as an American country, I do think we should start exporting them there. And that's my opinion because that's where they belong. Because that's accepted there. Shouldn't be accepted here in America. And that's just my opinion. I don't like it, and I don't want it to be here in America. I've tolerated it enough, which I shouldn't have been. Um, but it's at the point now where I'm just sick of it, and a lot of Americans are. So I wanted to get that out of the way first because that needed to be said. Because last night, what we saw at the Olympics was absolutely disgusting. It defiled the name of Jesus Christ, which, boy, oh boy, you don't want to do that one. All right, so, all right. So let's get into chapter 7 and 8. So, all right. That which defiles. Chapter 7. The Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. The Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing. Holding to the tradition of elders, when they came from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And they observe many other traditions, such as washing the cups, pitchers, and kettles. So the Pharisees and teachers of the law asked Jesus, why don't you disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands? He replied, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites, as it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rulers. You have lot you have let go of the commands of God and are holding onto a human tradition. And he continued, you have a fine way of setting aside the command of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father or mother is korban, that is devoted to God, then no longer let them do anything for their father or mother. Thus, you knew fully, sorry, my arm, the word, thus you knew fully the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many things like that. Again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, "Listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of the person that defiles them." After he had left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples asked him about this parable. "Are you so dull?" he asked. "Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and out of their body." In saying this, Jesus declares all foods clean. He went on, "What comes out of a person is what defiles them, for it is from without, within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person." So uh, basically, what Jesus is telling them is like anything you speak out. This goes back to the, life and death spoken on the tip of the tongue. Those who love it will eat its fruit. So basically, when you, how do I want to say this? Basically, what Jesus is saying right there is that like anything you speak out, good or bad, it defiles you if it's bad. You know, so when you slander somebody, when you say you're this, you're that, and you're slandering them, you're defiling yourself because are you're speaking out blasphemy to other human beings, other people. I, you know, and in today's world, there's some things that need to be done that aren't exactly blasphemy. At the beginning of this, I spoke about a certain type of people. All right, we have to speak up to them and let them know that they're in the wrong. We need to keep like reminding them that they're not supposed to be like that for that to stop. That's not blasphemy. That's not defiling yourself. It depends also how you go about it. But, you know, I could go on and on about the subject, but um okay. Jesus honors the Syrophoenic women's faith. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it. Yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek born in Syrian, uh, Phocinia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. "First, let the children eat all they want," he told her. "If it is not right, take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Lord," she replied, "even dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he told her, "For such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." She went home and found her child laying on a bed, and the demon gone. So, Jesus saw her faith within there. So I'll actually explain why this is repeating itself. So that way at the end we know why exactly, you know, again, why this is repeating itself. I know I repeated myself, but Jesus heals a deaf and mute man. Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee, and into the region of the Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his finger into the man's ear, and he spit and touched the man's tongue. He took up to he looked up to heaven with a deep sigh and said, Ephathathia, which means be open. At this, the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anybody, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear the mute and speak. Hear and the mute speak. Okay. So Jesus healed this guy, and you know, he got him out of being having trouble hearing and all that. So, all right. So we're on to chapter 8 now. Jesus freed the 4,000. Chapter 8. During those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way because some of them have come a large distance. His disciples answered, But where, in this remote place, can anyone get enough bread to feed them? How many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. 7, they replied. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. When he had taken the 7 loaves and given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to distribute the people, and they did so. They had a few small fish as well. He gave thanks to them also and told the disciples to distribute them. The people ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. About 4,000 were present. After he had sent them away, he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the region of Dalmanutha. Pharisees came and began to question Jesus to test him. They asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply and said, Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to it. Then he left them, got back into the boat, and crossed to the other side. So Jesus helped them, and they wanted a sign that, hold on. So the Pharisees were keeping up with Jesus. The Pharisees were like the spies to Jesus, judging him with everything he did, and then just saying that he again, he's they were judging him based upon what he did, and the Pharisees were always trying to like condemn him, bring him down so he wouldn't do that. And the Pharisees are the Christians that go around pretending you're a Christian. The Pharisees are the people we're dealing with that we saw in the Olympics, where if we say something bad to them and correct them as Christians, they'll tell us we're wrong for it. That's what the Pharisees are. That's what the Pharisees stand for in today's age. The Pharisees is a person, uh, you know, the people in Christianity that aren't reading the word or anything like that, but they're claiming they're Christian. Like we see a lot of it on the internet. So the yeast of the Pharisees of Herod. The disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for one loaf they had with them in the boat. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. They discussed this with one another and said, "It is because we have no bread." Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, "Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see, and ears but fail to hear, and do not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for 5,000? How many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up?" 12, they replied. "And when I broke 7 loaves for 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up?" They answered, 7. He said to them, "Did you still not understand?" So Jesus was like questioning them for questioning him. That's one thing that I was always told that Jesus did, and nobody really talks about that anymore. But Jesus would go and ask you a question in reverse of what you questioned him with. That's what was great and why Jesus, is such an incredible person. I do that sometimes where people will question me and then I'll turn around and give them a question. So, all right. Jesus heals a blind man at Bethesda. They came to Bethsaida and said, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he spit on the man's eye and put his hand on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more, Jesus put his hand on the man's eye. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home, saying, "Do not even go into the village." So uh, Jesus said, "Stay away from the village." Like he was warning the guy about what not to do. Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus and his disciples went on to the village around Caesar Philippi. On the way, he asked them, "Why do people say I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets." Hold on a second. They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others say one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. So again, I like what Jesus is doing it. Jesus is like, don't claim that I am the Messiah. Don't go around telling anybody that I am the Messiah. He doesn't naturally want people to know. So Jesus predicts his death. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, after 3 days rise again. He spoke painfully about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. When Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the concern of God, but merely human concern." So, people use that sometimes. "Get behind me, Satan." So, um, yeah. The reason Peter rebuked what Jesus was doing is because that would be considered as a darkness. in which if you rebuke darkness, that's pretty much rebuking a demon. So, the way of the cross. Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in the adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with holy angels. All right, so we're on to chapter 9. So we'll start there tomorrow. Um, and so yeah, that's about it. We're getting further and further into finishing this book 16, and then we're on to Luke. So, and then we're not too far from finishing it. It just feels weird holding it and then it being so loosely because I remember back a few months ago when I was doing it, how it felt when I was holding the other side of it. So it's just weird now. All right. So with that said, boy oh boy, I've learned a lot since I read this. Like I look at things a lot differently now. The Bible is meant to teach us incredible things, how to handle ourselves, how to understand, certain matters, and also I learned that Jesus Christ was not, he was kind, yes, but he had his limits too. There were things he liked that people, there were things he didn't like that people did, and we saw that in one of them. So, um, but yeah, Jesus Christ was a lot different than what people make him out to be. So, um, but with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today. I'll be seeing you in the next one. If you like this, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and have a blessed day.